Hello and welcome to this episode of the Fortnightly Dispatch, brought to you by the Baker Street Irregulars. I'm Steve Doyle and I'm your host. Well, I have to say, it has been a little while since we had an episode. You know, the standard release frequency of the show is every 2 weeks, hence the Fortnightly Dispatch. But of course, you know, as many things go in the Sherlockian universe, we had to claim irregularity. Some real life reared its head, but all is well. And we are back in the saddle. So it's been busy, but it's time to get back with our show. And we have a great one today. I am extremely happy to bring our guest on today. You know, as I've said in the past, my favorite thing about this show and the whole point of it is to introduce people who I think are interesting and that I know and that I think you should know too, if you don't already know him. Or it's also an opportunity to get to know our guests better. And so it is without any further ado, I bring on one of my favorite Sherlockians and a friend of mine. I'd like to introduce Mike McSwiggin to the show. Mike, welcome to the show today. I'm really glad that you are here today, and it's nice to see you. And I'm grateful that you came on the show. We see each other semi-regularly, but nonetheless, it's good to have you here today. So thanks a lot.
Hey, thanks for having me, Steve.
So I often start the show with kind of two standard questions, and these are always questions that I'm curious. So I'm curious about it. I know the answer to one of them for you, but I assume other people are interested too. Mike, where are you coming to us from today?
I am in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Great. And you are a member of the local science society there, the Tankerville Club, right?
That's right. Yep. Have been for quite a while. And currently I serve as, I don't know what you want to call it, the number two in charge. Our mutual friend, Dan Andriaco, is the most scandalous member. And he gave me the designation of second most dangerous member. Colonel Moran, of course, was in the Tankerville Club.
That's right.
So yeah, it's a great group founded by another mutual friend of ours, Paul Herbert, in I think 77, maybe in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, he passed away a couple of years ago, but he ran it up until his death, and Dan and I took over and have done our best to keep it going, and we have. It's a fun group. It really is.
Yeah, I would second that. The Tankerville Club is a terrific thing. We'll talk more about all of
Sure.
that
Yeah.
down the road here. So the second question is, and I don't know the answer to this, even though I know you pretty well. How did you find Sherlock Holmes? How did you become a Sherlockian?
I pretty early on, I read a lot of the stories. I'm from Baltimore originally, and I went to a tiny little, it's a school that no longer exists, so I suppose I can badmouth it. It is one of the craziest, most religious, fundamental schools I know of in the United States. And my folks who are Irish Catholic, for some reason, sent me to this crazy school that hated Catholics. And
Wow.
I've never been able to get a good answer on that one, but so it worked out. And they had this little tiny room that was their library. And I think I was probably in first grade. My gateway drug was Encyclopedia Brown, and then some of the Hardy Boys. And there were not a lot of mysteries there, but there were a couple of, I think that I couldn't tell you who printed them, but like single case, like almost like pamphlet books. And I read those, a couple Sherlock Holmes stories, like I think it must have been Speckled Band, Redheaded League. I read a couple of those, wanted more, went to the public library. I know I devoured the whole canon when I was still in elementary school. I forget what year, but I loved it. And it just off to the races from there. I never let it go.
That's really interesting. How did you get from just reading the stories to finding this larger world that we all, many of us live in now. Because
Yeah.
that can be difficult, that
Oh
getting
yeah.
from getting from, oh yeah, I read the stories, but you could have many people. I think there's still many people out there who who are big fans of the stories and the movies and everything, and
Mhm.
have no clue that there's this
Oh
parallel
yeah.
universe.
Totally. And it's weird. I actually found out kind of early on about the wider Sherlockian world, but didn't do anything with it. The Six Napoleons of Baltimore, one of the oldest scions in the U.S. They back when I was a little kid, and still to this day, they have this yearly event at the Pratt Library. And I remember reading about it in the newspaper when I was, I don't know, 10 years old or something like that. And, they talked about, screening movies and having people talk about things in the stories and other things related to mysteries and crime fiction. And I thought, oh, I want to go to this. And then I read more in an article in the next year or two when they did something else. And they were really talking about, it's this group of people who meet and talk about Sherlock Holmes. I was still a kid, and I thought about convincing my mom to drive me down to one of their meetings. They used to meet at the most amazing restaurant in Baltimore called Hausner's, which no longer exists. It was like half art museum, half just gorgeous restaurant.
Wow.
And
How
if
old
you
were
ever,
you? About how old were you at this time?
I maybe 12, 11, 12, I guess.
Wow, that's really young to be eating at Hausner's now. Come on.
Oh, well, my parents would go every year for their anniversary, and they would take me, I guess, to ruin their evening. And I loved it. You couldn't make reservations, at least as far as I know, and we would have to wait in line for like 2 hours to get in, but it was worth it. If you ever watch Mad Men, there is an episode of Mad Men where they have something happen at Hausner's, but by that point, Hausner's was gone. So they digitally recreated it. It's really
Did it look
fascinating.
like it?
Yeah, yeah, it did. And you can find pictures of it online, and it doesn't look real. It looks like nothing else, and the food was good. But anyway, I felt guilty
Welcome to
about.
Restaurant Review Hour.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anybody who's in the Six Napoleons from back then, they will understand what I'm talking about. There's a couple people who are still out there. Um, but I felt guilty about convincing my mom to drive me 30 miles to downtown Baltimore for this, and I didn't do it. So when I got a little bit older, I made her drag me to these sci-fi mostly conventions at Hopkins, but there was a little bit of mystery stuff. So I kind of got my nerdy bases covered, but I didn't do anything as I got older. I lived in Baltimore till I was in my early mid 20s. Then I moved from Baltimore out here to Cincinnati because my wife, and I'm going to put this on video. This is fine. She conned me into moving to Cincinnati. And a year or two after I moved here,
I don't want you to get in trouble now, Mike.
oh, she knows, she knows. But a couple years after I moved here, she was working at a local university, and one of her coworkers was a professor of geology, Meg Riesenberg. She was a good friend of Peter Blau's, and she was a Sherlockian. And she said, "Hey, you should have your husband come," because it came up in a conversation, I guess, that I liked Sherlock Holmes. And she said, "We've got this local Sherlock Holmes group, the Tankerville Club. Mike should do that." And I'm, believe it or not, kind of shy. You wouldn't know it when I'm around Sherlockians, but I'm actually kind of shy, and it was difficult for me to actually go to a group and interact with people. But my wife really got me to do it, and I give her a lot of credit. And Paul and I really hit it off my first meeting there, and over a couple of years, he, really convinced me, hey, you need to do stuff. You need to go places. I had gone to one or two of the From Gillette to Brett's that you organized before I started really going to Tankerville. But I didn't interact with anybody. I just sat there pretty much.
I don't
But
remember you.
yeah, I purposely blended in the background. And I had a lot of fun. But Tankerville, and more importantly, Paul, really got me to start interacting and writing and talking, and I really love that. So I guess that's right how it happened. It's all Paul's fault.
Interesting. That's interesting to me, genuinely, because um, I am a big advocate in the Sherlockian world for the importance of the local scion society. I think
Okay.
the whole hobby, as we know it, was uh, took off because of it's built on a foundation of science societies, and which is a remarkable thing in the in fandom in general. I mean, to use
Okay.
the term, I think that there is it's a really kind of an amazing thing, organically grown up thing that happened, and they're all here everywhere. And I kind of feel like they went fallow, the idea of them, for a while. Maybe it was
Yeah.
the advent of the internet. People thought, well, we can bypass all that and just, connect directly, which is kind of true. But I think there's the power in this hobby is interpersonal, in person.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
and part of the problem with the internet, I'm not going to make a big spiel about it, but it allows you to be hyper specific. So I don't just like Sherlock Holmes, but I like this one tiny aspect of Sherlock Holmes, and I want to talk to people who have that exact same view, and you just end up in these rabbit holes. Whereas in a Scion, at least one with a decent number of
mhm.
people, it's a bunch of different kinds of opinions, people coming at it from different areas, people interested in different things, and that makes it better. I don't want to
I
talk
think
to a bunch of people like me. I would get a headache.
well, the world would be a boring place if all we had was people like yourselves, ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, it
Oh,
would be,
totally.
and the right, and I think that and that sort of shared experiential aspect of it is really amazing, and so
Yeah.
I was very happy to hear that. That's very interesting to me. I completely agree with you. And the advice that Paul Herbert gave Mike is good for everybody. It's really good to get out of your own comfort zone and go and do something. I think you'll find that once you
Yeah.
once you take
Totally.
that first step, you're like, whoa, okay.
Well, and just really with anything, you can apply it to way more than Sherlock Holmes fandom. If you want to expand your horizons and expand your horizons into a world that is sometimes complicated, full of lots of different personalities and aspects and events and all kinds of things like that. I got super lucky in that the first person I really latched onto in the Sherlockian world was somebody as smart as Paul. And he gave me a lot of advice and said, hey, you really should do this. You need to meet this person. You need to read this book. Here's why maybe this book isn't great. Read it, make your own decision, blah, 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 blah. He just gave me great point after great point, and it really served me well because he knew a million times more than I ever did.
Me too.
He
He
was
was,
smart. He was a sweetie. I miss him dearly. He was
yeah.
insane in the best way.
His wife Barbara was an angel.
Oh yeah, yeah. I still see Barbara regularly. She lives not too far from me, and she's a sweetie pie. Both Paul and Barbara changed my life a bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
And one of the things you will not see, because I don't want to move my camera so you can see the disaster to my left, but a fair amount of the residual of Paul's enormous collection is beside me. The rest of it's upstairs in my garage. But Barbara charged me with helping to slowly. Well, she would probably like me to much more speedily liquidate it, but slowly I'm doing that.
But you can find Mike
Yeah.
at the table at Sherlockian events,
Yep.
selling
Yep.
unique and affordable
Definitely.
yeah.
Always price to move and always things nobody has seen before. There was nothing Paul did not like. Although I admit well, actually, did you end up with the Meow Mix bag that had
I
Sherlock
I
Holmes on
did. Indeed I did.
it?
Yeah. What Mike's talking about is when Paul's I knew Paul too, and Paul had his collection was enormous. I think it was bigger than anybody even really knew.
Yeah.
Except maybe Barbara. I mean, it was really large, and um, comprehensive. And I mean, I thought I had a problem. I thought, oh, I've got 8 copies of the complete Sherlock Holmes over there by Doubleday. What do I need that for? 8? Paul had like every variant known to man.
I think one, I didn't count all of them up, but it was either study or sign. I think he had 400 different editions at the, not now, but when we started.
Yeah, stunning. And it's, complexity. But
yeah.
Paul was one of those guys that collected everything, right? And so
mm-hmm.
I had the very good good fortune of going over, I almost said misfortune, the good fortune of going over for a preview to get items ahead of the general sale of stuff, which was very sweet of the offer. And one of the things I came home with was a Meow Mix cat food bag, empty cat food bag, with a cartoon cat wearing a deer stalker and holding a magnifying glass on the front of the bag. That's how complete as Paul was in collecting.
He had egg cartons. I think Kroger was touting their great inspection of the quality of their eggs, so they had a little Sherlock Holmes. And he had wooden crates back when Coca-Cola would do those, what did they call them, return bottles?
Yes.
Return glass bottles. And I don't even remember why, but only if you emptied the wooden crate that they came in of all the bottles, there was a Sherlock Holmes silhouette burned into the crates. So he had to have one of those crates. I mean, yeah, if it had a deer stalker or a magnifying glass, that qualified it for going into his library.
Which also had absolutely magnificent things too. But
well, I mean, here's the crazy connection between my childhood budding Sherlockian fancy and Paul. I remember reading at some point when I was in either elementary or middle school in, I forget which text, writings about the writings, the Houdini book. I think it was, am I remembering right, Memoirs? First edition of Memoirs. Correct me if I'm wrong. But Doyle had presented a copy that he had inscribed to Houdini. And there was a picture of the two of them with the book, I believe on a steamship. And it was in this book that I had read.
Yes.
And I just thought, oh, wow, what a cool moment. Guess who had that book?
He had the book in the picture.
Yep. A retired school teacher. I mean, considering, he was not a multimillionaire or anything like that, but that guy found stuff in the craziest ways. And he was honestly secretive about his collection. Very few people knew what he had till he was gone. Yeah. And he had some other stuff too that was mind-blowing. One of, I think, only 3 surviving copies of the one sheet for Clive Brooks' Return of Sherlock Holmes. The crazy, it's like, I don't know what color that is, but this vibrant orangey purpley background. Yeah. It's a pretty memorable image. And where was that? Hiding under his bed.
But he was a great guy. He's greatly missed, that's for sure.
Yes, totally.
I'm sure he'd be happy to know his club is thriving in his absence by people, the people who are carrying it on. And that's that's great.
Yeah.
Well, so we've been talking a little bit about collecting, mostly Paul. But are you a collector, Mike? Do you collect?
Yeah, I do. Not like Paul. My wife would have me drawn and quartered if I were as a vacuum cleaner as Paul was. So, and to be honest, I just don't have that level of fever. I do have some, and I limit it to. I mean, I'm not going for first editions of Doyle's first printings and all that jazz. I have to limit myself, but I do collect. I mean, I guess I can just expose myself on video to this confession. A lot of people know it already. I'm a chronologist. So I do collect chronologies, which are a pain in the butt to collect because they're very hard to find because there are very few people who want to read them. Most people want to burn them. So, and actually, because and I know you said no prep, and I didn't do any prep for any answers, but I figured within 5 minutes you would have nothing to talk to me about because I'm not that interesting. I did put a pile of show and tell next to me off camera, and it will serve me well for this, because this actually ties into a couple things we just talked about. So here is a chronology that is very hard to find, that actually came from Paul's collection, that if you read an article I wrote about collecting chronologies, actually in a publication you put out earlier this year about collecting stuff, I talk about this and how I looked everywhere because supposedly Paul had every chronology, including a lot of the ones I was missing. This was hiding behind a broom. That Barbara was banned from ever dusting in Paul's library after a certain point, and I think in a point of protest, she stuck a broom in a corner saying fine, and there was dust everywhere, and this was hiding behind the broom. There's only I always forget how many, 300 copies. They never reprinted it. It doesn't exist in any other form except this.
Who wrote it? Who is the
This is
chronologist?
Baron Gould. I'm sorry, the
That is
chronological.
That is Baron Gould. Okay.
This is his second chronology. His first chronology was split into two halves in two, I believe, 1948 issues of the BSJ. And he did not, it was really an interesting read, the BSJ articles, but he put kind of a cursory amount of thought into the dates that he chose. He took a lot of what Watson wrote as gospel. He fiddled a little. He also just fiddled in general. As a big player of the game, he put in a lot of facts that are not in evidence into that. And then after a few years, he actually took another stab. So that was 48. This is 55. So this is a lot more comprehensive, and he goes into a lot more detail about how he picked dates and so on. So I collect things like this. You know, I collect everything.
That's actually quite nice.
Yeah, I love it. And that was actually one of the only things I was missing. And I actually have most of my chronologies nearby because I've been revising a presentation that I'm giving later this month. I don't know when this is going to air. Maybe this will be after I do the presentation, but I've decided to clear out the lecture hall we're going to be going to at the end of this month in St. Louis by actually talking about chronology. So I expect within 5 minutes everyone will get on. So I have all my chronology sitting around. I go after.
How many do you have? Do you know?
I can't say I have every single one. Some of them are. I just haven't hunted down. I have the ones that are near impossible to get, the old ones, like as editions, like let me see, like the first edition of H.W. Bell's Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. That's a great one.
That's a good one.
And let's see, one or two others, just because God knows this bores most people to tears. And this is one you rarely see with the dust jacket. This is Baker Street Chronology from 53, Zeisler.
Yep.
I mean, I don't just have them to have them. I use them. You know, I write chronology stuff. I like to see what people before me wrote so I can tell the world why they're wrong. That's just kind of a joke. Chronologists never agree with each other. But they are a great reference, and I enjoy reading them because I like to punish myself for past sins. And also it is nice and limiting because there are only so many. I'm trying to remember what the total number is. I think it's around 50, 60 chronologies, although some of them are really not worth having. I won't name those. That'll be nice. But and actually a couple that are basically plagiarized off of somebody else. I won't name those either. But they're fun. They're fun for me. They're fun for me, and they're self-limiting because there's a new one every couple of years. There have been a couple of new ones in the last few years. Bruce Harris has put out 2 recently. There've been a couple. But yeah, I limited to that. I try to get all the classic Shaw writings on the writings. I don't necessarily need to have first editions or perfect copies, but some things you kind of have to go for the expensive stuff because they've never been reprinted.
That's just it. Yeah, it's just
yeah.
it.
I mean, there really, if I had more time and money, I mean, because God knows you wouldn't make a dime on it. So many things that are long out of print, I would love to just reprint, you know, and just maybe, if I was lucky, recoup the costs. Just because I hate, you know, I mean, you're never going to make never going to make money. But why should somebody who wants to read a book that's in no libraries or almost no libraries have to spend $150 on a $3 paperback? It gets frustrating.
Yeah.
But,
Well,
but yeah, I try to limit it.
well, Mike, we need to take a break.
Yeah.
We need to take a break and hear from our favorite commercial sponsor. All right, we're back. I'm not quite done with your interest in chronology, Mike. Mostly because I don't share it that much. I mean, I understand um, I understand I mean, I recognize some of those really early ones as highly collectible and foundational and that sort of thing. But um, what is the attraction? I mean, I know that like Baring Gould sort of like put it on the map and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But
why?
yeah,
It's
I'm just no,
it,
I mean, I'm genuinely curious.
I mean, if I were to give you an astute answer and probably just lie, I would say, just like a lot of psychologists have written papers about why so many people are attracted to detective fiction in general, and it's a desire to find order within
Mm,
chaos. And what more form of chaos is there, at least in our world, the Sherlockian world, than trying to put logic to the insane dates in the canon or the lack of any dates. Uh, but if I were to give you a more real answer, chronologists are insane. We are. And but it's a fun insanity. If you get two or three of us together, I mean, you can get all of us together and we will disagree on everything, including whether or not we're actually there.
are there like rivalries within the chronology community?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit.
I mean, it's like competitiveness or something, or
Not a lot. Sometimes you'll read an article somebody writes, and there's a little bit of snark there. If you go back to some of the early chronology stuff, there's a lot of snark.
that's
Uh,
kind of why I asked because I know
yeah, I
some
mean,
of them really, they didn't hold back sometimes.
yeah. Well, I mean, like if you look at some of the S.C. Roberts writings in response to Reverend Knox, that a note on the Watson problem, that's incredibly snarky. And I mean, people always speak about that with a lot of reverence, but if you really read it, and I guess part of it is a joke, but it is snarky. And then some of the other early chronologies, some of them are a little snarky. Most aren't. A lot of them are pretty respectful. Uh, I know Starrett, he wrote about how, like at that time, if you count Watson, there were 6 chronologists and they all disagree with each other. That's the fun of it.
Well,
But
sure.
I don't like the other chronologists that I've been in the presence of. We actually all get along.
So
I
is there like is the idea that because sometimes I think it's like this. I compare it now. This is weird, but I compare it to the Jack the Ripper community. And yes,
uh,
there is a Jack the Ripper community out there,
yeah.
and half of them want to solve it, and the other half never want it solved because then then the game is over.
Right, right.
So is there in the chronology world? Is the quest to find the grand unifying theory of the world, or is it to just
Some
let the
might say
game
that.
go on, perpetually?
I can think of one or two people that I think that is a goal. I don't think that's possible. There are too many roadblocks. There are too many problems. How many times was Watson married? When was he married? Uh, if you really dig deep, it's a hot mess. And I don't care whose chronology you read, there are issues. There's always something to change something. When I did the chronology chapter for the missing three quarters for Mike Whalen, uh, he wanted me to write it, and I was about halfway through, and he said, "So have you figured out what year?" And it was down to 2 years, and I said, "I think I have." And he said, "Could you make the case for 1 year or the other?" And I said, "Yes, I can absolutely do it." And so he kind of wanted 1 year, and I can't remember why. It might have had to do with a photograph. I think it did. And so he said, if possible, prove that it's this year. And now I forget which year it was off the top of my head. I have the book nearby. I can look it up if I need to. But one of the aspects of chronology, so, the big aspects, and you actually talk about it in Sherlock Holmes for Dummies, you've got references to newspapers, almanacs, and so on in the text, mentions of other cases that have already happened. So, it's got to be after Empty House or whatever. Where we are in the Watson marriages timeline, those kind of things. But another thing you can do, and it's truly part of playing the game, is you have an aspect in the story and you try to relate that to real life. And so I found a character in the story and figured out, okay, if they are here and they need to find a physician at this time, who are my choices? And I found a real person, and I found one who had that specialty who died. So that ruled out the latter years. So I was able to pick the earlier year because he would have been dead otherwise. So but I can easily have another chronologist come in and just take a shotgun to what I did. That's just how it goes.
It is kind of fascinating. I mean, I don't think I have the patience or the focus to do it, because I think it seems like it would be very exacting to be kind of that kind of thing.
Well, you have to do it and put it down.
I think I would go nuts after a while, but
yeah, I wouldn't want to do it all the time every day. I'd be drooling. But in fits and starts, it's fun, at least for me.
Well, that's so interesting. That's really interesting. So, I know that you go to conferences. You mentioned going to Gillette to Bread in the past.
Mm-hmm.
You go to New York.
Mm-hmm.
You are a member of the Baker Street Irregulars, and we're recording this in July, and here it is. It's still 6 months away, but how important for Sherlockians is it to go to New York, even if you don't go to the dinner, do you think?
For a lot of people, it's incredibly important. Mainly because it's fun. I mean, I know plenty of people in my local scion and other scions that I go to where they don't care. They like their local scion, and this is no cut on them. They like their local scion. They want to talk every couple of months or so about Sherlock Holmes and see their friends and have a nice meal, and that's it. Or maybe talk about some new adaptation or pastiche or whatever, but they put it down and they move on with their lives, and no cut on them at all.
No, not at all. We have that in my club too, and that's fine.
Yeah, totally. But then there are some people who really want to get immersed in it, and it's not an immersion like at a Comic-Con where you're dressing up. And I'm trying not to cast aspersions, but I honestly don't understand the dressing up stuff. But there's that kind of immersion. But then there's an immersion where you're amongst other people who have that crazy passion in whatever topic you're talking about, and you can engage with them, have fun with them. While everybody is very different, the fun intensity is in a lot of people, and so it's fun to go to these different events with people, whether you're going to the dinner or not. Right. There's lots of fun to be had in New York if you never have the opportunity to go to the dinner.
Yeah, I would urge everybody to go if they can.
Yeah.
But like as you say, it's not for everybody. And but, there are these regional events, and like the annual Dayton Symposium in Dayton, Ohio, which you do have a hand in that too, I think. Is that right?
Well, I mean, I've presented there, and I've unofficially consult Dan Andriaco. He's been lining up the speakers for the last several years and has done an amazing job with that. And I unofficially chat with him about, you know, opportunities, who to sign, who to go after, things like that. But I mean, mainly other than just, you know, giving a talk every so often, or I'm a dealer there with Paul's collection. You know, I'm really just a spectator. And it's great. I was worried, you know, the pandemic was going to knock a lot of that stuff out. There are a couple, or at least one big one that I think is still virtual, that used to be an in-person, but you know, they're coming back and forth. Dayton, I didn't go to Dallas this year, but I heard Dallas was amazing.
Oh, it
We'll
was.
both
It was great.
be at St. Louis.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff is great. And you know, I've been enjoying, as a spectator in a way. Greg Ruby, I think, has been to every event there is this year, including several in Europe, and he told me about some of that stuff. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to do more. I mean, that's a problem with you having a job and a family. I don't have my priorities straight. I'm missing out on some of these.
Nah, you get around, but that's the thing, right? You know, the word community gets used a lot in the real life. I mean, in the world in general, this community and that community and stuff. I think sometimes that word is misused because a community implies people literally physically coming together and being together in community, or not just having mutual interests in something,
Yeah.
you know, but literally coming together. And I would say that the Sherlockian world is a genuine community of people. And when you go to these events like Dayton or New York or Cincinnati or Minnesota or Indianapolis, when, you know, we work it up, we emerge from our stupor and decide to do it again. It is a genuine community because you make friends, you see people that you make new friends. And it's, I mean, how important has that been in your life? How has the Sherlockian world impacted you as a person?
I would be probably one of the youngest curmudgeons in the country. I was so shy. I didn't know anybody when I moved from Baltimore to out here. I work a lot, so other than like people I know at work, I wasn't being exposed to people. And then, of course, with the pandemic, and I moved to my basement, and I still work from my basement, at least for now. I mean, if I didn't have, you know, the Sherlock Holmes world to keep me sane, or less insane than I would otherwise be, I can't imagine what I would do. I mean, it is my main thing that's not work and not like activities with my family. It is. And even my wife has said that when I became an active Sherlockian after I met Paul, that I became a happier person. And she was totally right. I know that's the case for a lot of people, even taking the pandemic out of it, just being able, I mean, I know rather well a couple of hundred Sherlockians easily.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I can't imagine how many you know.
I
And
know a lot. I know a lot of people. I wouldn't know any of them.
yeah, and I can count on one hand with some fingers left over the number of negative experiences that, and frankly, are pretty minor. I don't get along with people in the grocery store. If you write a check, I flip out when I'm behind you in line. I find so many things to get irritated about. And yet I go to these crazy hodgepodges of people in these different cities, and I'm happy.
Great leveler. It's the great level, you know.
Yeah.
And people who are, I know, like you, a lot of people, and only a percentage of them do I know them, and I'm genuinely grateful to see them. I don't know what they do in rest, and I don't care. It doesn't here today in this world. It does not matter.
Yeah. I like knowing those things about, especially the closer,
Yeah,
closer
well, you have it
people,
in it. Yeah, you will
friends.
eventually learn about whatever.
But
But
yeah, there are people I've known for years where I mean they could frankly be assassins and I wouldn't know. But I
it
always
does not
have fun
matter.
when I share a meal with them. So well, yes, if they take a hit on me, it'll matter. But yeah,
I'm not
I
on your
love
list, am I?
yeah,
Why
I
do you
love
want to
yeah, I
have
love
dinner
it.
with me? No, but it's true. And I have found that it's the as I advance toward my decrepitude, I think about I think about what a true blessing this community has been, for us. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's it's a remarkable thing. It really is. So,
Oh yeah. So,
so
totally. I mean, who would have thought that a professor of geology who made an offhand remark to my wife would get me to just fall down the greatest rabbit hole ever. I mean, it's it's just funny how things like that work out.
so you mentioned earlier, we're getting close on time, by the way. I told you this was going to go fast.
I don't know how you do it.
The the you mentioned earlier that you would go to science fiction conventions. Do you have an interest in science fiction?
I did for a while, and I got really weirdly irritated with something that pretty much ruined the hobby for me. I was as much into sci-fi as I was mysteries, and I would go back and forth reading the two. Was a huge Arthur C. Clarke fan. Read everything he had done. His huge pile of work, and I got to it was the final sequel to one of his greatest books, Rendezvous with Rama,
Oh yeah.
which is basically a first contact kind of book where you come in contact with aliens and alien technology for the first time. All his stuff was really rooted in real science, so I like that. And it ended, I won't go into it here, but it was the worst ending to the best idea I've ever read and got so mad. I just put science fiction away. And occasionally I'll read it, but so much of sci-fi that I get exposed to these days is real apocalyptic, and it just depresses me. And I want to read and watch movies to escape and have fun. I don't like really hardcore horror movies or anything that's going to depress me. Life does a great job as it is. I want to enjoy myself. So, oddly, reading mysteries where somebody gets shot or stabbed or whatever doesn't bother me, but the apocalypse that hasn't happened does.
The collapse of civilization.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
can be a bummer. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that and I'm not dissing. I know you have an intense love of The Walking Dead, and that I when I would watch that, I would have to kind of take certain things, just not think about them, because if I really thought about it, I'm like, I'm really bummed out.
I get it. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It can be. Yeah. No, I get it though. And again, not to be hokey or anything, but that's part of the really, I think, the power of our Sherlockian world is that it's it's kind of in a bottle in some way.
Yeah, it is.
You
It
can go
is.
into it and it's kind of a part. You can step out of whatever the crappy headlines of the day are and go and
Yeah.
I'm going
Yeah.
down to the library, or I'm
Yeah,
going
totally.
I'm
Totally.
going to open the book and read, and it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it is escapism. It's not even idealism. It's just, I mean, I wouldn't do it if it wasn't fun. And it's just fun.
It
It's
is.
fun.
Well, that's a great place for us to end our show today, Mike. Told you I'd go
Great.
fast. Mike is the one thing we didn't talk about is you are now on the staff of the Baker Street Journal.
That's right.
We yes, Mike is the associate editor of the journal and doing a great job. We just had a change of editorship this year. It's not even been there. It is. Yes, that is. Hold that up a little bit there. That is the spring issue of the journal,
Right.
where our new editorial crew makes their debut. And
I'm continuing my role as Dan Andriaco's henchman.
Well, we all need a good wingman and a side man and someone you could fall back on. I've got a
That's right.
couple.
I just wish he wouldn't make me carry his luggage all over New York.
As long as he's not making you wash his car, I think.
No, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a good gig. It's a lot of work. Dan's doing an amazing job, and my job is much easier than his. But yeah,
Mine
it's
work too. It's a job. I don't know.
yeah.
You think about in the old days. Julian Wolfe used to do that thing all by himself.
On a couple of different typewriters, right?
Yeah, he would use different typewriters for different typefaces, and a manual typewriter, and then he would be and get it all together, and he'd read all the books, and he would do all the
Yeah.
unbelievable. But
Yeah.
it takes a team to replace a guy like
Yeah.
that.
Oh, totally. And well, hopefully they'll keep us from going more insane. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I've been doing the I don't exactly want to call them reviews, but the Baker Street inventory, which gives me a great excuse to track down books, read them, and talk about them. And my God, somehow Dan is even letting me in one issue. The next issue, I'm gonna have pieces on 2 different solar ponds things. I'm really big into the Pontine world, and I know that will. I'd like 2. One is enough.
Not one, but 2.
Yeah. So yeah, well, I have 3 loves: Sherlock Holmes, Solar Ponds, and Nero Wolfe. So I try to, if I'm able to, I'll sneak in a little more Nero Wolfe and stuff too.
There
But
you go.
yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and this is really just an extension of the community, because it's not like Dan and to a lesser extent myself are writing all this stuff. It's editing, and these articles are written by all kinds of people, both inside and outside the BSI. And there's some seriously amazing scholarship that's out there,
Right?
and
No,
it's
I'm
fun.
serious. I've read some stuff over the last decade. Well, I came on about 10 years ago. I don't know, something like that, 11 years ago as publisher. And of course, I was already subscribed to the journal, and I would get it, I'd read it, and and then put it on the shelf and kind of.
Yeah.
But my perspective changed a bit. When I took the job on, and there are amazingly smart, talented people in this hobby, and ingenious, the ingenuity in some of the stuff that gets written.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
And who would have thought there was anything left to talk about? My God, talk about beating a
Right.
dead horse. There's no horse left, but
No.
we keep finding new ground. And I mean, there's lots of really engaging stuff. And the great thing is, if you're getting things from a diverse group of folks and diverse opinions, even if you don't like the second article in this issue, you might love the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th. There's
Exactly.
so much interesting stuff, and there might even occasionally be chronology stuff in there. Who knows? Maybe somebody will.
You are duly warned. Okay, on that note, Mike, we do need to end. We are getting right up against it.
All
so
right.
Thanks so much. This
Thank
was
you.
so great. I'm so grateful. And I look forward to seeing you, well, certainly in St. Louis.
Definitely.
And in Indianapolis and everywhere in between. So take care, my friend, and we'll see you later.
And that's it for this episode of the Fortnightly Dispatch. I want to thank Mike for coming on the show. That was great. I also want to thank all of you, because, we did have a kind of a gap in the production of the show, and that was really nothing more than conflicting schedules with some guests, personal work schedules in real life. So we all have real lives out there, and just a variety of things, and some travel, and it just worked out that way. And but I received some very, very nice messages from people expressing they hope everything's okay, and looking forward to the show returning, and everything is fine, and the show is back. So thank you very much. It meant a lot to me, and I'm very grateful. I will be grateful for you to come back for our next episode too, because we have a great guest lined up, and you will not want to miss that show either. So that's it, and we will see you next time.